Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Folks, it's been said that may you live in interesting times, and indeed, we live in historic, interesting times. And our focus is on a couple related matters that seem to have come together over the last week. And our starting point today is a disappointing July jobs report that came out late last week, showing only 114,000 jobs were created versus over 175,000 new jobs expected. The unemployment rate surged to 4.3%, the highest since October of 2021. On top of that, factory orders fell 3.3%, according to the U.S. Commerce Department. This was reported to be the largest decline in the Manufacturing and Producers Index since the COVID pandemic in the spring of 2020. In response, the stock market crashed, not just in New York, but around the world. It is too soon to tell if this will be similar to the crash of 2007-08, where the market lost half of its value. Biden said he wants to implement rent controls due to the high cost of housing. This is the socialist approach to problems. Does anyone remember what happened to the USSR? Yes, it collapsed around 1990. Back in the USSR. Biden also claimed that the high cost for goods was due to greed by manufacturers and retailers, despite the dramatic increase that they experienced in raw costs caused by irresponsible federal spending by his administration. Speaking of spending, how about the feds giving $8.5 billion to Intel? And then Intel just announced it's laying off 15,000 employees. The U.S. may be heading into something called stagflation, the period where unemployment is high and economic activity is low, but the economy is still experiencing inflation. Communist China spies on the Americans and engages in transnational repression. This is important, folks, because it violates the sovereignty of the United States. The Department of Justice has unsealed an indictment surrounding an alleged Chinese spy in Florida who has been feeding the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, intelligence for 12 years. The report came from NTD, which is a network for free Chinese. Their source was the executive director of Falun Dafa Information Center, Levi Bodie, and former U.S. defense official and attaché to China, retired Brigadier General Robert Spalding. They say that the CCP is infiltrating every sphere of American life and targeting all dissidents. Illegal Jordanian migrants who tried to breach Quantico base allowed to walk free after posting bail. Located just south of Washington, D.C., Quantico is the training base for the Marines, including the unit that flies the Marine One presidential helicopter. It is a secure facility. You do not get in there without an appointment and plenty of ID. I know, I have been there on official business. So these two illegals allegedly just wander onto the base, and all that happens is that they were allowed to postpone in their ICE cases, with one set at 15 grand and the other set at 10 grand, and were released. What? Can this really have happened? Why are they not locked up down in Gitmo? Inquiring minds need to know. I'm not done talking about the failures of the Biden-Harris administration. A headline from Breitbart: Kamala Harris failed to connect one person with high-speed internet with $42.5 billion from the infamous infrastructure bill. Harris was supposed to lead the Biden-Harris rural broadband expansion. It has failed to connect one person with high-speed internet despite having $42.5 billion from this ludicrous infrastructure bill. Of course, I assume she will deny this if she ever shows up in the public, like she denied being border czar. Hey, it's only been 3.5 years, folks. DHS pauses the controversial migrant flight program amid alleged fraud. DHS, that's the Department of Homeland Security, the folks that are supposed to be keeping us safe, confirmed that this program is temporarily on hold out of an abundance of caution. Internal report found, get this, massive fraud in the application process. At least 494,799 migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela have been allowed entry into the country under the administration's parole program. The information indicates perhaps that as many as 25% of the forms have false or incorrect information. Really? Florida and Texas have received the most parole participants. Our soft on crime policies jacking up car insurance premiums. I doubt anyone living in a large or even medium city in the US feels like their auto insurance rates are reasonable. I certainly don't feel that way. The last few years have been especially expensive. What has happened during this time? Well, soft on crime Soros DAs, as they're called, have taken over control of the criminal justice system in most major metropolitan areas. Not surprisingly, car thefts have surged to their highest levels ever reported. Over the past 2 years, auto insurance prices have surged by an average of 27% nationally. That's an increase from $127 a month in 2022 to $161 a month by the end of 2023. A McKinsey study, McKinsey, of course, being a big, infamous management consulting firm, generally pretty well regarded, produced a study in 2015 that said that DEI was important because there was a link between profits and executive racial and gender diversity. I want to start my commentary with a clear statement. I regard diversity as the secret to the success of America. The term that I grew up with was the American melting pot. People from all over the world came here and melded together to create something really special. I salute diversity in my first book, Decline of America. I also feel that many corporate boards of directors have failed to steer corporations in the right direction due to a lack of diversity. Mostly, it's a bunch of members of the old boys club controlling the action. Having sharp people with different views would be a real benefit. So the problem is not the goal. It is the approach. The approach tied to the McKinsey report was labeled DEI. So just being different was more important than whether you were a really sharp person who could bring something new to the table. And its application was so ragged that it failed not only to identify talent, but actually discriminated against some less favored minorities and others who were more favored. So discrimination with a different wrapper. In fact, the article mentions BlackRock, which was full on board with DEI, including a fund that it operated. What happened? The fund underperformed the market. Big surprise there. I do not want to focus on diversity to the end. I just want it to be rational. Merit is number one. Having diversity is a bonus. Speaking of irrational discrimination, there have been disclosures recently about something called NewsGuard. NewsGuard is supposed to be the arbiter of fake news. They evaluate various publication sources for their veracity. The problem, of course, is the scumballs doing the determinations are whack lefties. The problem here is that major corporations have been relying on these credibility ratings. That means that the publication source is conservative. They are more likely to get bad ratings by NewsGuard and therefore will not get the advertising revenue that they need to survive. I encourage all to be skeptical of not just alleged news sources, but also of any operation claiming to verify those news sources. Chevron is leaving California for Houston by the end of this year. According to the report, Chevron has about 7,000 employees here in Houston already and about 2,000 at its headquarters in San Ramon, California. Chevron, of course, is one of the major oil companies in the world. This is a very significant development. I want to extend a warm welcome to the Chevron brass. They will find a pro-business environment here and, at least at the moment, some less expensive housing. I am sure the employees will like the fact that there's no state income tax. Here is some quick background information on these two great guests. Dennis Beaver is well known as a syndicated columnist for the Kiplinger newsletter and other publications. He is a successful attorney. He looks forward to helping others and does not charge readers who ask for his legal guidance, generally on consumer matters. He speaks French and Swedish fluently, and his English is pretty good too. His wife of 48 years, Anne, helps him run his law practice and has assisted him with a serious bout with cancer. Lyle Sussman is an emeritus professor at the University of Louisville. He is the former of the Management and Entrepreneurship Department. He is a best-selling author with 1 million copies of his books out in 15 languages. Lyle and his wife, Susie, have been married for 54 years, and she is also an accomplished professional. I have had the good fortune to meet both of these gentlemen and their wives in person. The bios of both of these accomplished gentlemen are much, much longer, but hey, we need to leave time for our discussion. Dennis, please get us started today. Tell us about your recent experience when getting contacted about an important follow-up meeting with your doctor regarding your cancer surgery.
Yeah, a little history. I had bladder cancer, and in six years ago, I had my bladder removed, right kidney, prostate. We couldn't find our car keys, and our Chihuahua vanished. Nobody told me, but they told my wife I had about a year to live. It's interesting. Had I been told that, would I have been the willing accomplice of the self-fulfilling prophecy? Who knows? But Anne replied to the surgeon, "You don't know, Beav." And it has been 6 years. I was stage 4. It was in my liver. And my oncologist refers to me as his miracle patient because I had the most aggressive form of bladder cancer with about a 2% survival chance. So every 4 to 5 months or so, I get PET scans and CAT scans. So all of a sudden, I don't get any phone calls. And suddenly a letter arrives at home. No phone calls, no nothing. We have voicemail, answering machines, you name it. Our telephones at home and at the office record all the numbers, shows who called or the number. So call and hang up, but still a number registers. Nothing since May. And a letter arrives at home. Poorly written. The English was not good. Dear Hart, my actual legal name is Hartley Dennis Beaver. So it was Dear Hartley. We tried to reach you several times and please call. The envelope in which this letter came was handwritten poorly, wasn't aligned, so nothing. What you would assume they would know how to. Pardon my voice. We have wildfires around town here. You'd think they would know how to use the computer to print an envelope. No way. So I phone the person, her name is, but initial L, no last name. I talked to her. Said, why didn't I get a phone call? Oh, I called you. I tried calling. When did you try calling? She gives me dates. We never got a call. Never got a call at home or at the office or on my cell phone. You have all these numbers. Oh, I'm telling you, I tried. Yeah. How about an email? Oh, we don't do that. We don't do that. Right. Now, it's important to be on top of cancer, right? It could come back. Probably not. It's probably cured. Hopefully. But the incompetence of this was absolutely stunning. So what is hell going on with this country? Why can't high school graduates write, have a sense of language, grammar? That's what led to my writing both of you and expressing my frustration.
You you brought up two major issues. You bring up the issue of competence, and then you raise the question, what's happening in this country? Well, let's assume that the person who said they reached out to you, but in fact did not, was about 25 years old. That means they were born about you're born about 1999 or 2000. They were raised with a cell phone in their hand. They were raised in a milieu, in an environment where they simply had to press an icon and they had answers to their questions. They were raised in an environment where pressing an icon would tell them whether or not their grammar was correct, whether or not spell check were correct. That is, they came to believe that was a help, when in fact it was a horrible, horrible hindrance. It prevented them from learning exactly the kind of skills that you're highlighting. Skills about relating to a reader, relating to a listener, skills about understanding the situation. And in fact, your scenario is not only about communication skills, it's also about understanding the severity of the message. You were a patient that needed valuable information and you weren't getting it. So regardless of the fluency of the message, you weren't getting the essence of the message. It was not only English malpractice, I see it as almost medical malpractice.
Yeah.
Well, it is a real challenge in the United States today. As a professor, I have been shocked, especially with my younger students, the first or second year students. They do not appear to have really had the type of structured education that I had growing up, and that I think both of you did. And one of the things that I think is very much missing is I have begun assigning short research papers some of my classes. I've got students who have been admitted to this private college who have never done a research paper through high school and do not know how to do footnotes or endnotes, do not know how to reference stuff from the library and stuff like that. But I am hearing from some of my fellow professors, and particularly a finance professor, by the way, Lyle, that he just assumes that they know nothing. I mean, starts from zero, which means that the courses at the college level, if you assume that, you're teaching a college course that's half of the course is going to be a high school remedial course in math and statistics and things like that many of us had in our first year of college, but were set up for it by having good math skills and things leaving high school. So I am concerned, and I know in some of the schools today they're talking about taking the cell phones away as a way of getting the students to focus in the classroom, because distraction is a big issue too.
I have an experience you two I think will enjoy. I taught leadership and communication in a master's accounting class. So these were MBA students who were getting a master's in accounting. So they come in with a very, very strong quantitative background. They can multiply two-digit numbers in their head and they'd get them right. And the first meeting we had, I said, okay, you're all going to give an impromptu speech. And I thought the class was going to have a fit. I thought they were going to call 911. I said, all I want you to do is talk to your colleagues about some certain issues related to accounting. And to a person, they said, but we don't have our PowerPoint in front of us. How can we do that? That's what they said. How can we talk without our PowerPoint in front of us? And I said, well, I want you to know generations of MBA students did it before you, and you will do it in my class. Knowing something is one thing. Being able to communicate what you know is very, very different. And if you want to succeed in society, you have to go beyond knowing something. You have to communicate what you know in a way that people will see it as knowledgeable and respectful and as meeting their needs. Dennis, let me ask you a question about your case. At any time, did the agency or that person ever apologize for creating the frustration they created?
No, and in fact, I even sent an email to one of the executives there. Very, very nice lady. I left her a voicemail. Here's what happened. This does not make me happy. Then I sent her an email, kind of summarizing that I've not heard back from anyone, and it is a superb facility. And in fact, one of the head physicians there, when he first came to Bakersfield years ago, I had a talk show, a Saturday morning radio talk show. I had him on twice on a first-name relationship basis, and great guy, had great treatment. The guy saved my life. And I told in the email, I said, I am here today because you were there for me yesterday. That was my closing line in the email.
You know, when we talk about communication, there's an assumption that it's about grammar and syntax and spelling and word choice and vocabulary. And obviously it is about that. But one level above that, which is what really differentiates those who succeed versus those who don't, is understanding context, understanding the situation, understanding the person who's going to be reading the message or listening to the message. And what I'm hearing and seeing from my colleagues at the university and what I'm reading in the relevant papers, there's a huge deficiency, not just in the basics of grammar and syntax and spelling and vocabulary, but in the nuances of understanding context. The scenario you presented, Dennis, is the combination of pure grammar and foundation principles, but also context, the situation, and what's compounding the problem. Back to your question, Dennis, about what's happening in our world and of competency. What's compounding the problem is the introduction of artificial intelligence and ChatGPT and the other software packages where a student can simply say, write me an essay on topic X, and they press the button and out comes a 10, 15-page report on X, and they turn it in. Exactly. David, you are still a professor. I retired 6 years ago, but I am hearing horror stories about students turning in papers that they didn't even write.
I am very concerned about it. And one of the solutions, papers that I mentioned earlier, are personal. In other words, the question is on business ethics, and it is, what is the basis for your personal ethical guidelines, and where did that come from? Out of, say, 8 papers, I will get at least 20 of those papers will come in, and I will read them and send them back to the student and say, this paper does not even fit the assignment. Now, I don't know if that's because they tried to use AI. AI is still pretty new. It's not readily available to everybody. It's out, but it's not totally available. So I think it will be an increasing problem in the future. And that I've also begun to build into my syllabi that use of AI is not permitted for school assignments. And we're going to fine tune that, because they can use AI in an in-depth research paper. If you wanted to get started on a topic, you could say, hey, AI, tell me a little bit about topic X. That's legitimate. That's a fair use. But then they still have to go and do the homework. So separating the starter point using AI from what we want them to do as researchers, that's going to be indeed a growing challenge as we go forward, because AI is all around us and it's come very fast.
Dennis, your case, I keep coming back to your case. What's happening in the medical system right now is algorithms are driving many decisions, administrative decisions and medical decisions. And once an issue came up in your case that an algorithm couldn't solve, the human being who was charged with solving it couldn't solve the problem. And not only could that person not solve the problem, she made the problem worse.
This young lady who contacted me, she's a gatekeeper. And sometimes the lowest level person in an organization is critically important, in this case, to patients and to the image the organization radiates to the world.
Well, the question becomes, how do we get, and where is the focus that needs to be? And I have been arguing that we need a big focus on K-12, on the basics. And, I get a little concerned, and I've said this in my social media, that we don't need to be teaching sex education to 6-year-olds. We need to be teaching English, manners, and math. And even though I'm a business school professor, I really push STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. And in fact, I'm very excited. My one of my sons is a high school teacher, and he's teaching engineering in high school to stimulate the students. It's part of their math department, to stimulate the students to think about professions in engineering. And I think that's very important, because we cannot be successful as a country without having people that are willing to do the math and the statistics and pursue that kind of stuff. And like I said, even though I'm in the business school, I strongly promote people pursuing the STEM subjects.
Not just technical skills, but social skills is the issue of grade inflation. Years ago, there was an assumption of what a 3.0 grade point meant. We can't make that assumption anymore. Matter of fact, the assumption now is that grades have been inflated by about 0.8 over the last 20 years. That a 3.5 today would be like a 2.7 10, 15, 20 years ago.
That's a very valuable point, Lyle, and I've encountered that, in that the students come to me and will have an 88 average, and the 90 is required for an A-, and they'll be, after the semester, they'll come and say, well, Dr. Schein, I really needed an A- in this course. And it's like, it's an 88, it's not a 90, and we don't do that. Now, the Vietnam War actually triggered the current wave of grade inflation. We're still suffering from that, because what happened is if Joe Blow flunked out of college, you got a 2S deferment that back in the mandatory draft, which ran through part of the Vietnam War, you got a 2S deferment. If you flunked out of college, then they put a rifle in your hand, sent you to boot camp, and sent you to Vietnam. So a lot of the professors were opposed to the war in Vietnam and used their political leanings to influence what they were doing in the classroom. And as a result of that, we had tremendous grade inflation that triggered in the 70s. One of the things that I'm frustrated by is that in higher ed today, every class comes with a student faculty evaluation. For young faculty, especially your assistant professors, your associate professors, those student evals are considered in promotion to full professor. And so it gives the professors who are already, who grew up in the system of grade inflation and who are hopeful of getting good reviews from their students, even further incentive to give grades that are frankly not earned.
A few years ago, I gave a presentation, and it was called "The University of Lake Wobegon." Remember when Garrison Keillor talked about Lake Wobegon? All the women are beautiful, all the men are strong, and all the kids are above average. Dennis, I think you were dealing with an administrator who graduated from the University of Lake Wobegon, where everyone was above average.
I wish it was so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we, and this is not the three of us. I think our country, our world is now reaping the consequences of believing that everyone is above average. David, thank you for this. I think everyone viewing this has an important question to answer themselves, and that is, did I graduate from Lake Wobegon? Am I doing as well as I can? Am I performing as well as I should? Am I communicating in a way that really helps someone at the other end?
And my observation is that when some of the worst things in the world, the worst things imaginable, happen to you or family or close friends, to look at it and can you extract something beneficial, something that will help make you a better person, help you help others along the journey that we all follow. And Dave, thank you so much for this time.
Thank you.
It has been my pleasure. Dennis Beaver, Bakersfield, California, and Emeritus Professor Lyle Sussman from the University of Louisville. And I have been so delighted to have both of you with us on Saving America. And this is my take on the big hostage swap. They did recover 3 deserving Americans who were wrongly held hostage. Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, U.S. Marine veteran Paul Whelan, and one who I had not heard about, a little less publicity, journalist Alsu Kumasareva. They were released as part of a complex prisoner swap. This involved 24 prisoners from the U.S., Russia, Germany, Poland, Slovenia, Norway, and Belarus. A key part of the deal was Germany's release of Vadim Krasikov. He was serving a life sentence in Germany for what judges concluded was a Russian's state-ordered killing in Berlin in 2019. Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz admitted that it was difficult to allow this legitimate prisoner to be released, but he played ball with the rest of the world. Here's the problem. Reportedly, at least 40 other Americans are still being held as political prisoners in 16 countries around the world. Of course, there are China, Iran, or Russia, but there are also hostage cases such as Hamas, which is believed to have at least 5 American citizens. Why has the Biden and Harris administration not taken more action at an earlier point? Among the Americans still being held in Russia are Ksenia Karolina, a 32-year-old amateur ballerina and spa employee based in California. She is a dual citizen, was visiting her family in Russia. Get this, she made a $50 contribution to some group helping Ukraine emergency workers, and this was the reason that she was arrested, for treason. Another notable case is freelance journalist and former U.S. Marine Austin Tice, age 31, who was kidnapped in August 2012 while working in Syria. The rumor is that the Syrian government has him, but the government denies that. Also listed as still held hostage is Mark Fogel, age 63. He was a teacher at the Anglo-American School of Moscow. He was arrested at the Russian airport in August 2021 and charged with carrying a small amount of medical marijuana, which had been prescribed in the U.S. He is incredibly serving a 14-year prison sentence. Now, why was Brittany Griner released and not this man? Folks, yours truly does not gamble, but if I saw someone from this administration playing poker, I would have to join the game so I could make some real money. These folks do not know how to do basic negotiation. After a couple of weeks of speculation, Vice President Kamala Harris announced that her VP would be far-left Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. The only good thing I can say about him is that he did serve in the Army National Guard. Remember, folks, this is the governor who presided over the burning of Minneapolis, the destruction of their police force. Paired with Harris, this makes this the farthest left ticket to ever run for president from either major political party. Americans are not a bunch of far-left wackos. I believe that when they find out the real platforms of these two, this party or the election will be over early. Harris passed up Pennsylvania Governor Shapiro, and most feel that this was due to anti-Semitism of a block of her supporters. That is too bad because a little diversity in the ticket might have helped. In fact, of the list of possible choices, the round of pundits have ruled Walz the worst choice. Now, for the GOP, Trump needs to practice some restraint. Yes, it's time for that. Point out what a foolish set of positions the two Dems hold. Stop, yes, stop talking down about any GOP candidate or current office holder. Stop talking about 2020. Time to win 2024 and to learn from what caused Trump to lose the 2020 election. If he plays it smart, he should win at least 44 states. This is now Trump's race to lose. Americans will be the losers if he messes it up, since the Dems are running a pair who are far too left for this country. Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. Recently, there was an important ruling in the Alex Jones bankruptcy case. Here's a quick summary. Mr. Jones built a big following for a show called InfoWars. He has claimed that numerous events were actually media hoaxes. So he's called a conspiracy theorist. Among the media hoaxes that he's claiming are 9/11, and in particular, the sad massacre of 20 school children and 6 adults at Sandy Hook Elementary in Connecticut in 2012. A news report states, victims' families who sued Jones for defamation said they were subjected to years of torment, threats, and abuse by people who believed the lies told in a show. One father said conspiracy theorists urinated on his 7-year-old son's grave and threatened to dig up the coffin. So this is certainly not a trivial issue in anybody's book. The families filed lawsuits in Connecticut and Texas against Jones. Jones eventually acknowledged that Sandy Hook was real, but far too late. Juries awarded $1.5 billion in Connecticut and another $49 million in Texas. Jones has, of course, filed for bankruptcy. A recent issue was whether the InfoWars company should be liquidated or kept intact in the personal estate of Jones. A federal judge just ruled that InfoWars would be part of his estate and not liquidated at this time. Since Jones is in Texas, he has the protection of something called the Texas Homestead Act. That protects your home, the car you used to drive to work, and basic furniture and things like that. So his home is not personally involved in bankruptcy. Everything else that he owns, that's not what we call the exempt, is fair game in the bankruptcy. In order to resolve these huge judgments. Estimates are between 5 and 10 million might be recovered by the litigants, again, against verdicts totaling over $1.5 billion. Now, Jones has not backed off entirely, claiming the lawsuits are a mission to silence him. He is still broadcasting via InfoWars, which is now in the hands of bankruptcy trustees. it is likely that he'll be asked to abandon any interest in the company, and I think he's already done that. A special issue here is why the First Amendment did not protect Jones. The quick answer is that if someone says something false that causes harm to someone else, that person can be responsible for defamation. The hard part is proving damages. Obviously, these juries accepted the description of damages expressed by the families of the victims of the Sandy Hook massacre. I'm sitting here with Tom Fox, the compliance evangelist, who is the author of more than 20 books on compliance, business ethics, and the FCPA. He is the founder of the award-winning Compliance Podcast Network and the voice of compliance, as well as the author of the award-winning FCPA Compliance and Ethics blog. Mr. Fox has practiced law in Houston for greater than 30 years and serves as an independent consultant, assisting companies with anti-corruption and anti-bribery compliance, international transaction issues. He has served as in-house counsel at Drilling Controls Incorporated, a worldwide oil field manufacturing and service company, and also with the well-known Halliburton Energy Services. I've been in the Greater Houston Business Ethics Roundtable with you for about a decade now, and it's been a delight to work with you in that capacity. As you know, what we do is we provide 3 questions. And our first question is, tell our audience what all this compliance talk is all about. Would this just be handled by a company's legal staff or outside counsel?
Really, it should not be handled by legal staff, David, because an in-house legal department has one function and one function only, and that's to protect the organization. Compliance has a little bit different function. It is there to detect and hopefully prevent illegal conduct from occurring. But if it does, it's there to remediate or fix it. And that means transparency, obviously antithetical to the privilege that many corporations hide illegal actions or other actions from. So they're really 2 different focuses. Compliance is there to figure out what the problem is and fix it. And that it speaks to the difference, but the greater compliance obligations are generally around a set of regulatory or legal obligations. So they flow from that. And then how do you actually comply with those and inculcate those into the very culture of your organization?
Tom, we hear a lot about the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is the acronym FCPA. What is it? Why do companies even need to worry about it?
Sure. The FCPA was the first international anti-corruption, anti-bribery law literally in the world. It was passed in 1977 within the Carter administration, and it was a response to corporate U.S. corporations engaging in bribery and corruption outside of the United States, to the point where it was so public they were taking tax deductions for it. And a gentleman named Stanley Sporkin didn't think this was right, so he was largely the godfather and author of the FCPA. It served as a model for literally the rest of the world, and the rest of the world caught up around the first part of this century. And since that time, many other countries have passed their own anti-corruption laws. United Kingdom, France, Germany, Brazil, India, you name the country, they've got an anti-corruption law. What the FCPA prevents, David, is U.S. companies from engaging in bribery and corruption outside the United States. So the recent Supreme Court case around bribery and corruption or gratuities doesn't apply to the FCPA because that was a domestic law, and this is an international focus. So if you do business outside the United States, you're covered in some way, shape, and form by the FCPA.
Tom, just a follow-up on that. I actually am old enough to remember when the law was passed. I'm a little bit older than you, I think. And there was a projection that this would make the United States uncompetitive with other countries that allowed paying bribes. Did that actually turn out to be true?
You know, David, not only did that turn out not to be correct, but the entire storyline got flipped because the OECD and other international organizations saw the power of preventing corruption at the local level outside the United States. And The world loses $3 trillion each year to bribery and corruption. So it's a huge economic problem. And the OECD put pressure on these other countries to put substantive laws in place. So, for instance, in 2010, the United Kingdom passed what they call their Bribery Act. That was their first bribery act since 1909. And as I mentioned, France, Brazil, Germany, most other Western countries have passed laws. And those, instead of this being a business deficiency or causing the U.S. to lose business, it's actually gone the other way. And many U.S. companies now are seen as prime providers of services because they do not pay bribes, and the money that they spend in a country goes to that country, not to line the pocketbooks of politicians.
That's so helpful, Tom. And our third question, share with our audience about your book, The Compliance Handbook, a guide to operationalizing your compliance program. I understand it's now in the 5th edition. And how does that help businesses?
Well, I'm going to have the temerity to have a copy right here and show you. But yes, this is my signature work. It is, in my humble opinion, the best one author volume on doing compliance or operationalizing compliance. David, as you mentioned, some of the companies I work for, I came out of the corporate world when I was exposed to compliance when I was still in the legal department. And it struck me that compliance, properly seen as a business process. Yes, it's in a response to legal and regulatory requirements, but it's really a process. And if it's a business process, you can study it, you can measure it, you can manage it, you can monitor it, you can improve it. Because it's just like any other process. So I'm really tried to, for the last 15 years, talk about compliance as a business process, try to explain to companies this is not something to be afraid of, because more effective compliance equates to more efficient business processes, and at the end of the day leads to higher ROI and profitability. So that if I believe, as properly seen as a business process, if you implement an appropriate business process to manage a risk, you're going to be a better run company.
And part of that situation is are not international companies required to have a compliance program to fit the requirements of the FCPA? And isn't there bonuses or at least some rewards for companies that have tested and established their compliance programs?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, David, because initially compliance programs were put in to comply with that law, the FCPA. The Department of Justice over the past 15 years has given a plethora of guidance on what their view of a best practices compliance program. But David, the more interesting approach is what I saw in the city of Houston, specifically in the energy industry. The first decade of this year, there was an industry sweep in energy for FCPA violations. Houston, Texas is the FCPA capital of the world because of energy and energy companies in Houston. But what was interesting, David, was the business response. The operating companies, the Exxons, the Chevrons of the world, they had gold standard programs. Well, immediately below that are the service companies, Baker Hughes, Weatherford, Halliburton, et cetera. And if you wanted to do work, you had to do work with one of those service companies, literally down to the $15 million software company that had one piece of software that bolted on something downhole and did something. And I represented a company like that. And I told them, if you want investment dollars, if you want a contract with a Baker Hughes, with a Halliburton, with a Weatherford, you're going to have a compliance program. And I finally talked them into letting me put a compliance program in. 2 weeks later, one of those companies came for a big investment. And the second thing they asked for was, we want to see your compliance program. It's a long-winded way of saying that compliance in energy is driven as a business initiative. And it's not so much that you have to have a program to get benefits from the government if you get in trouble. But if you want to do business in the energy industry or tech or financial services or pharma, or you name the industry, you have to have a compliance program. And so that's the part I try to focus on, David, is to try to indicate to people that it's a business response to a legal problem, but it's a business process. So let's put that process in place. Let's make it transparent. If somebody comes knocking and wants to review your program, you can show that to them. You're not going to show them trade secrets, but you can certainly show them the 8 or 10 elements of your compliance program. So Houston is the best example of a business response to the legal issue of international anti-corruption.
Tom Fox, it's been a delight having you on again. We've known each other for about a decade now, and first time I've had you over on Saving America. Tell our audience about how they can get more information on you and your publications.
Sure. First of all, they can reach out to me via email at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. I'm always available on LinkedIn, Thomas R. Fox. If you're interested in learning more about compliance in the podcast format, I am the guy. I have founded the Compliance Podcast Network, which is www.compliancepodcastnetwork.net. So any of those, you can reach me, and I look forward to catching up with anybody who might want more information on compliance or the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act.
America is suffering from the Biden-Soros crime spree, and we need to bring America back into a period of law and order. We need to bring back the death penalty to make sure people understand you do bad things, the state will take care of you, and promptly. In Pennsylvania, we watched for 2 weeks this crazy clown show as this one fellow just kept slipping in and out of so-called secured rings of investigators and searchers. He should never have been allowed into a low security facility. He was convicted of a horrendous murder. He stabbed his girlfriend to death by stabbing her 38 times in front of her little children. This person should have been taken directly from the courthouse to the death chamber and put to death. This should never have happened. In the meantime, I understand the estimate is the 2 weeks that he got to party and run around in Pennsylvania cost the taxpayers over $1 million that they're never going to get back. Yes. What kind of justice is this? How does this work for anybody in this society? In the meantime, we have the stunning news that a Los Angeles sheriff deputy was simply sitting in his car, not doing anything harmful to anybody, not committing any horrible racial incident, was shot to death. And that to me is a hate crime. He was in uniform. He was in a police car. Where has our society gone? How degraded is our society that someone would even think of doing this? In the good old days, you killed a policeman, the likelihood of your even being brought in for trial was pretty low because generally you were shot to death as part of the arrest. And I don't mean to suggest vigilante justice, and I don't mean to suggest careless police action, but I believe the police are afraid to shoot to kill. And that's a bad thing when you have really bad people with guns out there running around. Another hate crime, 2 17-year-olds stupid enough to record a deliberate crash where they ran over a gentleman riding a bicycle. He's 64 years old. He's a retired police chief from the LA area. He was at his retirement home in Las Vegas. And these clowns recorded it. There's no excuse here. This is first-degree murder. If it turns out the way it appears to be, death penalty time, folks. Let's set an example. Let's make sure that the death penalty is provided quickly and with authority so that we do not have the situation where people are not afraid of being prosecuted for crimes, including a deliberate, thoughtless, awful murder. This is the America that Biden and Soros have brought us. Now, why do we say that? Because George Soros, for some reason, he's a billionaire, came to the United States, has been funding anti-American causes for years. In particular, he is accused of having helped about a dozen anti-American, civilization, DAs across many American cities, these people have been soft on crime. They've been letting people out without bail for serious crimes. They've been reducing crimes. They've been refusing to prosecute crimes. Some of them have said, oh, well, if you shoplift less than $1,000, don't worry about it. We're not going to prosecute it. Enough is enough. And people need to know who these cats are, and they need to start voting them out of office. This is far beyond any rational situation that the United States and its hardworking, tax-paying citizens should be tolerating this. And when you use a gun in a crime, I want you to stay in jail. No bail. Use a gun in a crime, no bail. Kill someone, get the death penalty. Right now, people stay on death row for as much as 20 years with endless appeals. As I have previously recommended, 1 year maximum. You can't get it done in 1 year. You can't prove that you shouldn't get the death penalty in 1 year. Tough luck. Execution. America deserves it. The American taxpayer should stop providing hotel rooms for horrible convicted people, including the fellow from Pennsylvania we mentioned a minute ago. Biden has doubled down on the crime problem with his Marxist supporters and open borders with criminals pouring in. They are trafficking women and children. They are flooding our streets with fentanyl and terrorists. Enough is enough. Stores are closing in crime-ridden cities across the West Coast. My advice would be to have guards with shotguns at the entrances. Hey, it's simple. Would you like to leave with that merchandise? Great. Go back and pay for it. If you don't want to pay for it, you can get shot with a shotgun. It will be painful. It might kill you, it might not. But you need to make those kind of choices, and that is how to end these ridiculous crime sprees that we're seeing. And of course, when you get to the courthouse, when you've been arrested for shoplifting, you get a record from it. Whether it's $5 or $5,000, you get a record, and most people should be getting at least jail time, if not prison time. It's time to protect Americans who are hardworking, who are paying a lot of taxes, and deserve far better than what we're getting. What universe makes sense for any political party to be soft on crime? This insanity has not sunken in yet, apparently, on a lot of people in the electorate. Otherwise, they would stop voting for these awful people who are not prosecuting crime and protecting us, especially in our big cities. In the meantime, we've got anti-American scumballs running our local and federal justice systems. They're deliberately wasting time and resources on victimless so-called election crimes, while Americans of all ages and races are living in fear of violent crime and theft. Let's put the resources where they belong, on criminals, real criminals, people who affect everyday American life. Come on, Americans, vote out anyone in government who is soft on crime. Restore safety to our streets and our schools. Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.